students come in, then we'll just fill in the blanks for them when they come in. So I've already talked to her. Yeah, we're gonna get started. So Chris, thank you for joining us. I really, really appreciate your time. So with that, I wanted to kind of I want to know if you want to kind of give us a quick introduction about yourself, just a few words, so the kids can kind of get to know you, and we'll start from there.
Sounds good, Ivan. Thank you. Well, good evening, everybody. My name's Chris Young. Give you a little bit of background. Today I am what's called the Executive Vice President of Business Development, Strategy, and Ventures at Microsoft. I've spent my entire career pretty much in technology. I've worked at a variety of different companies on the East Coast, on the West Coast, companies like Intel, Cisco, now Microsoft. Before I joined Microsoft, I was at a company called McAfee, which is a cybersecurity company. And I work very closely with our CEO at Microsoft, Satya Nadella. Some of you may have heard of him. Our senior leader, a part of what we call our senior leadership team here at Microsoft. So one of the key people that help run the company. And it's a very multifaceted world, for a company as large as Microsoft. We cut across so many different elements of the broader technology landscape, from gaming. Some of you may have Xboxes or play some of the games that we provide from Microsoft. We obviously have Windows desktops, which a lot of you probably use Office and Windows in some of your education. Many of your parents might use that at work. We have a search engine called Bing, browser called Edge, and then we also offer a variety, a large number of business applications that get used to help selling activities. People build retail stores on Microsoft Cloud, which is a big part of what we do. We have products that help companies manage their data. We do a tremendous amount of work with governments around the world, in particular the United States government, which is a very large customer for Microsoft. So if you kind of think of most things that you do in technology, there's some element of that comes from Microsoft. Even on your Apple iPhone, we have a lot of apps that run on the iPhone. As I mentioned, our gaming products like our Xbox Live or Game Pass. Even some of you may have heard of LinkedIn, which is a social network, which many people access on a variety of different devices as well. So, Microsoft, very big. It's one of the oldest companies in tech. Company was founded in 1983, so been around for a long time, and obviously one of the largest companies in the technology landscape as well. I'm actually relatively new to Microsoft, and like I said, I've spent much of my career, a big chunk of my career, doing cybersecurity at companies like McAfee and Cisco and others. Microsoft also has a very big cybersecurity business as well, so I find myself engaged in a number of different things that relate to cyber in the work that I do. And and as many people, as you'll hear more and more, the risk of cyber attacks, cyber threats, cyber crime, identity theft are all areas where, as technology becomes a bigger and bigger part of our lives, we have to pay more attention to our security in cyberspace. So that's been an interesting part of my life. I remember when I first started out working in the field, we had very basic things like viruses and worms that we worried about, somebody infecting your email box and sending out a bunch of emails. Today there's things like ransomware and very large attacks that have, big impact negatively, unfortunately, it can be on companies, it can be on government, it can be on nonprofits. And so a very important part of the technology landscape is how we're protecting it. And that's been a big part of what I've spent my career on as well.
Well, first off, thank you for trying, keeping us safe and trying to keep us safe and being on the forefront of all that. One thing that I just kind of wanted to let you know is that Intel is a big, I know you mentioned Intel, and they're a big partner of ours. And so every Monday we have our coding club with three cybersecurity engineers from Intel working with our students. So, who knows, maybe they'll be future employees of yours one of these days. So Chris, I wanted to ask you, so again, the reason why we have these is we want to give inspiration to our students, right? About all of the different careers and exposure to all of the different careers that are out there. And so all of our students are in middle school and high school. So I want to ask you, when you were in middle school and high school, did you know you wanted to go into cybersecurity specifically and you wanted to be the executive vice president of Microsoft? Did you have those aspirations when you were in middle school, or was it what? Tell me a little bit about that. What can you share with us?
What's probably most interesting is, when I was in middle school or high school, there was very little technology. We didn't even have email in those days, and clearly, like, no mobile phones, no texting, no online gaming. I remember having I had something, when I wanted to play video games, like I had this thing, I had an Atari, a ColecoVision. Those things would all be probably stuff you'd have to buy on eBay now, because they don't make that. They don't make those kinds of games anymore. So, the world's really changed a lot. When I was in college, computer science as a major was very, very limited. Like, it just compared to where we are today in terms of what's available, the number of people going into careers in technology. And so that's a little bit of a long answer to your question, which is no. If I never thought I would do something like this. I guess when I was in high school, I always thought I would do something in business, which is a very broad definition at the time. But the tech industry, as we know it today, and as many of you will learn. I mean, just the tech industry as we have now just didn't exist, and so careers in technology, it was just a very different world. We didn't live our lives on computers and mobile phones. We used things like typewriters and fax machines and that sort of thing. It was a very different world. Here's an interesting one. Story I'll share. I was talking to someone about this the other day. When I was in middle school, or I remember, if I wanted to go to the bank, like if I earned some money, let's say I got some cash for doing something, maybe I grew up in Cleveland, so and sometimes in the winter I would literally shovel snow in people's driveways. It's a hard way to make money, but you make money that way. And if I wanted to deposit money in my bank account, I would literally go with cash to a physical bank, and you would take something called a passbook. It was like a little book. And, let's say I put $20 in, which was a lot of money at the time. And literally they would put that in a typewriter and type in that I deposited $20 and this was the new balance on my account.
Wow.
And that's how far we've come in terms of the way technology is such a huge part of our lives. And it's only going to grow. It's only going to go faster. COVID over the last year is making this change happen even faster in our lives. So it's in some ways it's hard to know today, what you want to do in the future and how that's going to fit into what the world looks like. But I will say, I tell anyone, if you think about where the world is headed, learning, picking up subjects that will help you, or at least give you the opportunity to work in technology, I think it's a good bet to make for the future, because literally every company is going to be a technology company. Everything we do is going to be powered by technology. And, some of the foundational building blocks of that are, you got to learn your math. You got to learn some of your sciences, in particular things like physics, as an example. those are just really, really important subjects, because if you want to be going to technical fields, it draws very heavily on mathematics and sciences as a core foundation for what you need to learn as you go into technical careers. So I do tell everybody, thinking about, at least preparing oneself to be technically proficient, understanding math, computer science concepts is really, really important, not only today, but I think will be increasingly important, as we look out over the next 10, 15, 20 years.
At what point did you decide, hey, technology or computer science is what I want to do, and I want to go and study this in college? And so, did that moment happen in high school? Was it when you got to college? Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, again, when I was in high school, I didn't have exposure to things like computer science and those kinds of careers. That wasn't in my worldview, I guess, is probably the best way to think about it. I went to I went to a high school in the city. We didn't, like most of the, probably half the kids I went to high school with weren't going to go to college. And a lot of people would go into vocational jobs, which is fine. So we just, what I tried to focus on in high school was, to try to learn as much as I could, so that I view, one of the most important things you can do when you're young is learn as much as you can, as well as you can, so that it sets you up to learn more. Like, I think high school is probably, frankly, too early to decide what you want to do, because if you use my story as an example, like, the world changed so much from the time I was 15 to the time I was 25 that, I couldn't have imagined at 15 what would be available to me at 25. But what did serve me well was doing well in math, doing well in science, doing well in my other subjects, so that I could go to a good college, and then doing well in college so that I could get a good job when I got out. It wasn't until probably after college that I really got exposed to some of the opportunities in technology. Because even when I was in college, that was still not quite as prominent as some of the other kinds of opportunities out there. So I kind of found my way to tech after college, but again, if you take this mentality that, I'm going to build a foundation, one of the better pieces of career advice I got from a mentor of mine was, you should, when you're young, you should be focused on learning, building your foundation. Later in your life, you can focus on earning and growing and taking on, different types of challenges. And so I just encourage everyone to, make sure you build the foundation, make sure you explore. The most important thing you can do is do well in your classes, and create options for yourself, create options to, go into good schools, to pick the majors that you want. If you can be in AP classes to test out of certain baseline subjects, so that you can, you don't have to spend 5 years in college. You can do it in 4 years, or maybe 3 years if you're really good at it. So there's a lot of benefits to just building a strong foundation and just being good at, like, the thing that you're doing right now.
I love that. That's fantastic. That's really good advice. Yeah, exactly. So can you share your experience? Can you share first off what college you went to? I know, but you've been to some very impressive schools, and so can you share that with our students? And then, kind of, what was your experience once you got there? Like, what was it like to be in college? And what were some of the fun things that you did? What were some of the study skills and things like that? Clubs that you might have participated in? Yeah.
Happy to share. So I went to Princeton for my undergrad, and like I said, I came from Cleveland, inner city school. My parents did have college degrees, although my father got his college degree as an adult. So I was alive when my father was going to college, like at night, to try to get his degree. So I don't come from a family of people who went to colleges like mine. We were a working family. And I was very fortunate to be able to go to a school like Princeton. And part of it was because I was able to do well in high school. My parents did have high expectations for both myself, and I have one sister who also, she's a doctor, so she also was very focused on her education growing up, and she's been quite successful doing that. But we were fortunate that there was a lot of emphasis on academics, doing well. And so I was able to go to Princeton, which, I'll tell you, really in many ways changed, sort of my life in terms of what I thought I could do, because I met people from all over the world. In some ways, growing up in San Diego, you're fortunate because it's you do have some access and exposure to people who come from different countries. When you grow up in a place like Cleveland at a time that I did, there weren't a lot of people from other places. Like pretty much everybody was from there or from the U.S. And not very far away. I think I might have met. There was I remember one kid in my class who had his family were refugees from Vietnam. But that was like such an exception. Like there were almost no Asians, if you can believe that. Like you guys live in California. There's tons of Asian people in California. Where I grew up, I think in my high school, there might have been 2 Asians. Like that's what it was like. Mostly Black people, a few white people, and like I said, just a tiny number. I don't think there was anybody who I don't remember having any friends who spoke Spanish as their native language growing up. Like, again, I know that sounds crazy living where you guys live, because that's not the world you live in. I live in San Francisco today, and obviously it's a much different world, but I'm just giving you a little bit of a window into what it was like for me growing up. It was a very different environment. And, going to a place like Princeton, I'm immediately, sort of surrounded with people who are from all over the world. A lot of my friends were from New York City. They had just had a very different perspective on things, and their parents did different things. One of the stories I'll share, when I grew up, I didn't know anyone who was Black who had money. Like I always say, I didn't know anybody like me when I was a kid. Like if you would have told me when I was 15, if you would have introduced me to myself today, I would have thought like, this guy has no idea like about my life, because I didn't know that Black people actually could have money. I didn't know that until I got to college, where I actually met people, kids whose parents were professionals, and they had things like a vacation home and that kind of thing. I didn't have exposure to people who were like that. But Princeton and being able to go there, on the one hand, it was a little harder because in some ways you're going to college with people who are very wealthy in some cases. A good example would be one of my classmates at college was, the son of Rupert Murdoch, who now runs News Corp, right? So you guys watch Fox or anything like that, Fox Sports, probably not Fox News, but, that whole company, that whole conglomerate, I went to college with those kids, and they were obviously in a very different position than I was, but, you have exposure, and it teaches you to think about the world in different ways. And that was very, it was good for me. It was important. It, created opportunities for me to, to spend summers working in New York. And, I worked on Wall Street one summer. I spent a summer in a research program out in LA, deciding on whether or not maybe I would become a college professor at some point and teach and research. I worked in if you guys know Progressive Insurance, they do all the crazy commercials with Flo and the Progressive thing. That guy, the guy who founded that company, had gone to my high school, and I won a scholarship from him. And then I wrote him a letter, and he gave me a job as an intern in the company, and I worked there for a few summers. And again, that was another. And he also was a Princeton alum, so he was same high school as me. Also went to Princeton. that was my connection. And I use that as a way to kind of find a different opportunity for myself. So just, I'm giving you some of these stories and some examples to help you kind of understand, sort of how some of these things evolve. You never quite know exactly where you're going or how exactly you'll get there, but it's just good to find good learning experiences, stretch yourself. And Princeton was a great was a great part of that for me. And I'm still to this day very active with the university because I feel very much like it's a part of my life today and what I've been able to do as an adult.
Okay. So I picked up on a couple of really cool things that we want to talk to our students more about, which one was a mentor, which is really cool. So we are working on developing a mentorship program there. So that's going to be really awesome. And then the other thing is that networking piece, right? And so it's always important, to know people and build those relationships, that network with others. And a lot of times that's how you get your foot in the door in places where you want to work and things like that. So it's always a good exposure. I want to so I want to talk to you a little bit about your career now. What what interested you in cybersecurity, and why did you kind of build? Because I read your bio. You hold some pretty impressive positions, and what was it about cybersecurity that kind of piqued your interest?
The real answer is I kind of ended up in cybersecurity by accident. Some friends of mine and I were working together in a consulting firm, had come up with an idea for a tech company where we would, and this is again a long time ago when browsing the internet was a very slow process. You literally had to dial up with a modem over a phone line, and it was very slow, and it took a long time for the graphics on a page to load. And it's like, anyone who's watching this, you guys are way too young to know what it was like to log into or check out a website in the early 90s. But we had an idea for a tech company where we could actually serve up web content faster. And as we were trying to build out that company, we ended up coming up with this idea that, well, hey, there's all this content out there that needs better security. And it was really through a process of discovery on a different idea for a startup company that led us to going into security. And I started this company back in 1997 called Cyvalence with a few other guys. And that was really my first foray into security, and I've not really left it since.
It's very interesting that it was by accident, and now it's such a big part of
Well, if you think about it, Ivan, cybersecurity wasn't a thing. You didn't call it cybersecurity even back in those days. There were some people who did information security. It was a relatively new area. Most people who work in things in cybersecurity today have not been in the field for 20 plus years because the field hasn't been around, all that long.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a newer area where that's gotten bigger. I mean, again, there were professionals, some people back in those days, but not nearly like we have now. And so, it ended up becoming something that, as I got into it more, it became more of something that became a mission. Like, okay, we're trying to keep people safe, and this is the importance of what we're doing in cybersecurity. And it's one of the reasons why, I have been in cyber for a long time, because I felt it was important to keeping people safe. And it's interesting because like right now at Microsoft, that's not my day job, if you will. So I'm a little bit more away from it today than I've been in a long time. But it's sometimes it's good also to get a different perspective, which is what I'm doing right now.
Yeah. So this is a two-part question. I want to ask you, what are some of the most challenging aspects of the work that you do, whether it's now or previously in cybersecurity, and what are some of the most rewarding things as well? So challenging and rewarding aspects of the job that you
So Ivan, I'm gonna get you to say that one more time. Your mask is muting you a little bit on that one.
have. I want to talk about some of your more challenging aspects of the job, and then some of the more rewarding aspects of the work that you do.
Yeah, so I would tell you, what's challenging, what's rewarding. So one of the challenging elements of technology, whether it's cybersecurity or other elements of technology, is it's highly competitive. There's just disruption is happening all the time. There's tons of like new companies coming into the space. So it's just a fast moving, highly competitive field to be in. And cyber is even more difficult because you've got, attackers, you've got these kind of unnamed, no named adversaries. Like if anybody plays, like if we got any kind of football players in the audience, you'll know it's like, it could be actually football or soccer, but it's harder to be on defense than it is to be on offense, right? Because when you're on offense, you know what play you're going to run, you know what move you're going to make. When you're on defense, you're trying to anticipate what play somebody else is going to run, what move they're going to make. And so I think, that's one of the one of the hard parts of cyber. I'll also say, however, that's part of what's really rewarding about both technology and cyber is the fast pace, the problem solving nature of what you do. In cyber, there's an element of keeping people safe. I think that's also rewarding for me. It's similar to people who serve in the military or in law enforcement. They do it, partially because they believe that, the importance of what their work is about keeping other people safe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's fantastic. I wanted to ask you, what is one of the biggest risks that you've ever taken in your career? And if you could share, how it all played out, and how important is it to take risks when you're young, in whether it's going for a degree that you think it might be out of reach, or just risk taking in general as well.
Yeah, risks. I think risk taking, calculated risk taking is certainly important. Actually, the company that I started that I referenced earlier, Cybalance, was probably one of the bigger risks that I took. And I did it when I was young. And so, in retrospect, you look back and say, hey, it wasn't really that big of a deal. At the time, it seemed like a big deal. I got a good job coming out of college. I was doing well at that company, gotten promoted, was making more money. And I had been applying to business schools, and I got into, Stanford and Harvard, and I was all set to go to Stanford. And then these guys and I started this company. And not only did I turn down going to Stanford, which would have been a very safe and obviously good thing to go do. It's a good business, really good business school to go to. Instead of doing that, I said, okay, I'm not going to come. And then me and these guys, we borrowed a bunch of money to start this company. So not only did I not go to business school, quit my old job, I took on debt as a way to go about getting started. And it was a good learning experience. We didn't turn it into a $1 billion company, which it seems everyone is doing these days, but we did. We were able to make it a very modest success, and most importantly, I learned a lot from the experience. And that's one of the most important aspects of taking risks when you're young, is to learn, teach yourself, right, or to learn from others. And I think that's one of the important aspects of the decisions and choices. And there's a lot of different ways you can do it, right? The answer is not for everybody to quit their jobs and go do a startup. I think we can all learn in different ways. A good example would be, I work with a lot of people today at Microsoft who are very successful people who've been here for 20 years, 25 years. Many of the people you'll meet from Intel have spent many, many years in their careers at Intel. They grew up there, some of them. One of my closer friends from Intel, he started his career there out of college. We're the same age, and he's worked there the entire time, and he became a distinguished engineer at Intel. And he learned a lot. He took on different challenges within the company, and he learned a lot of different things by working in different groups, taking on different projects. So there's a lot of different ways you can learn, and my experience is my experience. That's another thing. A piece of advice I often give to people is that you should. It's good to kind of look at other people's experiences and what you can take from that, but a career is not like a linear line that goes up and to the right. It's a little bit more like a mosaic. Like, you make these different decisions, you put things together, and if you step back from it, you can see the picture more clearly. And I think it's important to keep that in mind, because there's many different paths to success in your life and your career. And it's important you pick the path that works best for you, not because somebody else did a certain thing.
Yeah, thank you. That's some great advice. And want to leave some questions, some type of questions. So for any of the students or anybody online, if you guys have questions, feel free to chime in or put them in the chat, and then we'll go ahead and read them. But I have a couple last things. So if you're thinking about the tech world of careers in the tech world, is it safe to say that it's still primarily a male-dominated kind of industry? And what advice would you give to some of our well, let's start with that question first. Do you feel that it's making strides to be more inclusive?
There's definitely still more men than women in tech. That's a fact, right? Those are what the numbers are. And but I will say that a number of tech companies have really taken this challenge seriously, of making sure that we really improve the representation of women across the ranks in in many technology companies. And I would say a lot of organizations have really made good progress as it relates to women. I would tell you, unfortunately, maybe less progress as it relates to minorities. And that's been obviously a topic that resurfaced in a much bigger way, in the summer of last year. And so there's been a renewed focus on minorities and representation across different minority groups. But we still have work to do in terms of overall diversity and inclusion, or diversity, equity, and inclusion would be, I think, a probably more accurate way of describing it. And so, that's a function of many things. It's about bringing more people into the organization that make it more diverse, like women and different types of minorities. And it's about creating a more inclusive environment where people who might come from a different background than the majority can thrive. They can do well, they can have a voice, they can grow their careers, they can earn, they can be creative, they can be successful. That's important. And it's probably a job that will never be done. And it's a journey we have to go on. But what I would say, however, is I think there's a lot of appetite. A lot of companies want talent from diverse backgrounds. They want talent with they want females, they want minorities. And I think now's a good time to take advantage of that. The other thing is there's a lot of groups that specialize in trying to create pipelines into different companies and such when you get to that point in your education where it's time to move from going to school to getting a job.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I really appreciate that. Let me check if we have anything in the chat. We don't. Oh, who has their hand up? Oh. Emmy. Yeah. Hi, Emmy. Do you want to go ahead and...
Hi, how's it going? So this is Emmy. I work for Cal State San Marcos at the university, and I'm actually, I have two jobs there. One of them requires me to just, learn about more about college nights and stuff like that, so I can start putting that into my work. And one of the questions that I had throughout you talking and stuff like that, well, I actually have three, but I don't want to take anybody else's time. For the students here and stuff like that, what is the degree that you guys look more towards for in sort of for employment and stuff like that? And do you guys offer any internships? And if you do, for those internships, at what age do you start allowing students to apply for these internships? And how can these students get connected with you guys for that as well?
So just a company like Microsoft, so Emmy, I'm a little new, so I'm going to sort of probably guess at a couple of things, and I can, I can try to have someone follow up on some of the specifics of what you're asking. But, here's what I do know. A company like Microsoft we're large enough that we hire people from a variety of different backgrounds. We're obviously hiring a lot of engineers, but we're also hiring salespeople. We're hiring people in finance. We're hiring people in operations. We're hiring people in legal. We're hiring people in facilities, human resources, a lot of different places. The bulk of, the largest groups within Microsoft, however, are engineers, which, they're the company's looking for people with technical backgrounds. That could be computer science or, engineering degrees, that sort of thing. So those are, solid bets if you got that kind of degree, or you're on that kind of a degree program, that, there's probably some recruiting Microsoft is doing for people of that, with those kinds of educational backgrounds or skill sets. I know there's internship programs. I just haven't been at Microsoft long enough to tell you much about what they're all about and how to pipeline. I do know that we have, pretty extensive outreach across a variety of different schools. There's a lot available on our website too for people to go to submit applications. But it's actually a good question. I actually will go, maybe as a follow-up, I can go back and ask some folks what how we sort of source from different colleges and that sort of thing, and how early we go. I don't know whether we do high school internships or not. I'm not sure.
Perfect, thank you. And then just my last one would be, what advice would you have for these students, and in regards to this virtual world we're now living in? And how has that, sort of changed your job? What new things did you have to learn to learn your job again through this little world now that we're in?
Well, what's interesting is the world we live in now, we're fortunate in technology that we can actually do a lot of our work over video like this. Whereas, if you work in a restaurant or something like that, it's not many people have been as fortunate. So I'm reminded of that as well. But I would say there's a couple things that really change when you're working remotely or working virtually. One is it's harder to develop relationships and maintain relationships with people, share information informally. What people like to say, the water cooler conversations are not there. But there's a lot. It's interesting. There's a whole series of companies and that are trying to build these kind of virtual water cooler spaces to sort of compensate for what we don't have, because we're not all in offices like we used to be. And even if we are, there's a lot of social distancing rules and that sort of thing that make it difficult to congregate and share information. And I would say, the other thing, or some of the other elements of this kind of new way of working, or kind of how we are, how we're orienting ourselves going forward, is, you have to think about culture in a company and an organization differently. Like, what are the unwritten rules? What are the expected behaviors, the way you show up, how you dress? Those things are easier to I guess set as a standard when you kind of see people in an office or in a building every day. When you don't, it becomes a little bit more difficult, and that's a challenge. And then the last one I would say is just you have to be a little careful that, there's the lines between I'm at work and I'm at home get blurred even more than they were before because of technology. And you have to have good boundaries. You have to draw good boundaries. And as a manager and a leader, you have to be sensitive to the people on your team and their needs to tend to their families and to their personal lives, and to not be online all the time, working all the time, just because they're sitting at home and they don't have that clear boundary between when they're at work and when they're at home. So those are some of the things that we have to think about differently in the world that we're living in today. And I don't know that I know exactly what the world's going to look like when we all get vaccinated and things start to open back up. I suspect we'll get some aspects of the way we used to do things to come back, but they're not going to all come back. So the world will be different, and we will work differently. We'll interact differently, probably for quite some time.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. Yeah, I say all the time too. I'm like, oh, now we can add virtual worker or virtual learner to our resumes, right?
That's right.
Thank you very much.
All right. Anybody else? Any other questions? Yeah, Angel. Any of the angels have any questions? Aline, any questions that you may have? Reina, Avelia?
I think is that Diego?
Who?
Reina?
Diego?
Is it Diego? James?
I don't know. Well, Chris, thank you. And thank you everybody for coming and listening. We really appreciate it. We're gonna send you something with Christine one of these days, as a little thank you gift. We really do appreciate it. And thank you everybody. And yeah, we'll see you all soon.
My pleasure. You guys have a good night.
Thanks, Chris, so much.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.